Hey CardsChat members, welcome back to another video. Today is my final video here at CardsChat as an ambassador, and after 2 years here getting to know you guys in the forums, I want to say thank you for all of your kind words and all of your questions. So for today, I thought as a final video, I thought it would be fun to go through the top 5 questions that get most frequently asked in the thread about improving and what it's like as a poker player. So I'm going to go through questions about how do you deal with tilt? What does good bankroll management look like? What do you study and how long do you study? How did you transition into being a pro? Like, how did you know when you were ready? And the final question is, do you have to play a GTO style or can you stick with some old school vibes when you're at the table? So those are the 5 questions we're going to be going through today. Let me start with a short one here. Bankroll rules. Here is a quick little how-to. If you guys have been following my bankroll challenge in the vlogs on YouTube, you will know that these are the rules that I stick with for your bankroll. So all of these numbers equal the amount of buy-ins that you should have in your bankroll when you go to sign up. So for example, a single day live MTT, if it's a $100 buy-in, you need to have at least 50 of those in your bankroll. So you want to have $5,000 to play a $100 buy-in. Same thing with all the other ones. These are just recommendations that Jesse, my coach, gave me. And so I'm just sharing them with you. This is a quick, very simple, like, here are the numbers. If you get a little too gambly with your bankroll, you can bust it pretty easily. So this is what I follow. Take it or leave it. Obviously, if you have a second income, you just don't need to have that many buy-ins in your bankroll if you have a second income, because poker is not your main stream of income. Second question, how do you deal with tilt and mental game issues? This is a big question that covers a lot of different topics, so I can't address every single person's need in this one video, but I will tell you what is the most helpful path forward if you experience any tilt, if you experience lack of motivation because maybe you're downswing, if you have low confidence, or if you experience any type of fear at the table, if you're extremely risk averse. I recommended these throughout the forum, these books, Mental Game of Poker by Jared Tendler. There's a first one. It covers all the basics. You can see how worn in it is because I use these constantly to this day. I take them very seriously. A lot of different things came out of this book, and I thought I would share with you a specific sheet that I use and kind of walk you through some stuff that has helped me in the past. Besides having all of your stats, like when did you play, what time did you start, how much money did you start with on the site, and how much did you finish with, those are the basic poker things that help you know if you're a winner. How do you know if you're improving your mental game? I slide over here, and this is what I have for every online session. Ideally, I would do it for live, but I'm going to be real with you, I don't do this for live as well. But anyway, as a warm-up, these all came out of these books. Okay, so I made it into a sheet for myself. I have little check boxes over here, and as a warm-up, I'll write down 3 things that I'm working on for that session. This helps me focus my energy into what exactly I've been studying and then bring it to the session itself that day. So maybe I'm working on check raise bluffs from the big blind. We'll get into that in a minute. So I'm going to put that as one of my things, and I'll fill all this out, and then that way I'm kind of focused on certain plays during the session. I can kind of ignore bad beats or all these other things because I'm just solely focused on those 3 things. Performance is a question that's going to look different for everyone. It's just a mental area that you want to improve. So you're going to basically just fill out a logic statement that says, for example, I used to have big time mistake tilt. If I made mistakes at the table, it would kind of haunt me, and then I would take a few days off because I was just afraid of making more mistakes. In the book, he's talking about how if you make mistakes, you need to look at those as part of learning. So to kind of crumble after you make a mistake, it's going to be tough to continue playing poker or to take on any task. That is just part of learning. So my logic statement, for example, for the day would be mistakes are part of the learning process. Embrace them. That would be my statement for the day. And then these last few things over here are what I would do after the session. So my results of the session, quality of play, I would put A game, B game, or C game. How did I play that day? How was my focus level on a scale of 1 to 10? Was I really distracted and watching a bunch of shows in the background? That might give me a level 2 or something. Tilt level, how angry, how upset or how whatever type of tilt you have, which you will find in the book, you can put it in here. All right, evaluation and an analysis. These are just different ways where you can put onto paper what happened that day. Let's say in evaluation, you're writing down, wow, I took a lot of different bad beats today in big spots. That might help you understand what happened during that session. So you're not just looking at a loss on the day as you lost money that day. It's like, okay, well, actually, I just took a lot of bad beats. Or you say, I didn't play my best today. And then analysis is specific hands. So if you had confusing hands or whatever, you can type it up here. Maybe the next morning, that's how you study before your next session, is going over some spots that were confusing to you, or add it to a sort of study plan list off to the side. This is very analytical about your mental game process, but if you really struggle with tilts, if you really struggle with any sort of mental game issue, I highly recommend those books, and you don't have to go as crazy as I did in terms of writing it all down like this for every session, but this is just what works for me, so I thought I would share it with you guys. Let's get to the third question. How did you transition into being a pro, and how long does it take? I would still consider myself an aspiring pro, by the way. But yes, if you're trying to become a pro, you're a serious amateur, you love this game, maybe you're not loving your job and you think, oh, I would love the freedom of becoming a poker pro. I wrote an entire article here at CardsChat, so I'll link it up here in the video and in the description. And in that article, I'll pull it up for you here, I ask you 5 different questions. If you can answer yes to all of these questions, I won't go through everyone, but if you can answer yes to all of the questions in this article, you might be ready to become a pro. The gist of it is that you need to establish that you are a winner. You need to know how to track your stats. You need to be able to study. You need to be able to deal with downswings in terms of savings before you get into poker. You need to have, like what we just went over, realistic bankroll rules. All that stuff is in there, and it's all explained in that. But that article was written in response to how often I get that question. It's like, how do you even know? How do you know if you're ready to become a pro or if it's right for you? So if you want, you can explore that. I showed you guys my mental game sheet. I'll go back to the left over here once more and just show you these are all the different things that I'll track. Obviously, profit loss, start and finish. I also do have a completely separate sheet that tracks how many blinds I buy in with, how many final tables did I make, and what place did I get. Bunch of different stats. I'll link that sheet below as well if you guys want to take a look. I definitely caution you to 100% be sure that you are winning consistently over enough hands before you make that leap. And all of that is explained in that article, so you can look at that. Question number 4. This is the big one. This is the one we get asked all the time. What can I study to help me improve? So no matter what level you are, as you improve as a player, you will most likely find different resources more helpful than others along the way. So in the past, I found that training sites with pro videos, coach videos, they were the most useful for me. But I have now kind of built a solid enough foundation that I can use products like GTO Wizard, and I have a small study group that we use a bunch of different software, things like ICMizer, simple 3-way. There's different multi-way pot softwares out there that you can work on. Those are big ones for people who play live, especially. First things that I would recommend you to do is specify what types of leaks that you have before you venture out there to try to find the appropriate coaching material or the appropriate software to start using. Before you start investing in a whole bunch of different things, trying to figure out what works for you, start with your leaks first. So I made a video here on CardsChat about that, how to study like a pro, if you want to check that out after this video. And I outline a sort of step-by-step process for how you can study. And so for step 1, identify your most costly mistakes. For beginners, you might want to hire a coach at that point to help you spot those costly mistakes. But even if you can't, if you don't know for sure, I would just recommend start taking notes during your live sessions or your online sessions, and jot down any spots that came up that made you feel uncomfortable or that you were confused by. And then you will start to see a pattern. You'll start to notice, this is where I usually make mistakes. I feel like I'm losing in these big pots, or I'm losing on the flop here, or I don't understand what to do when a guy, three bets me for the fifth time in a row or whatever. Like, I'm still not adjusting well. So if you can't hire a coach, I would recommend, like I said, sign up for one of the free tiers or the lowest priced option tiers on sites like Run It Once or Upswing Poker. Those coaching sites are very good and they have very qualified coaches. And you want to actively watch those videos and take notes. You'll get familiar with how they are using software. You'll see them use it on screen for you, and you can ask them questions in their comments on the videos. So you'll start to get more familiar with the study process and how pros are doing it. So anyway, after you identify your costly mistakes, whether you hire a coach or you watch those videos, now you want to organize that into the more beginner mistakes and pre-flop mistakes. So start with stuff that's pre-flop for sure. Always start pre-flop. That's going to be the foundation for the rest of the hand. So you want to start with your pre-flop mistakes. If it's something simple like I'm not calling enough on the button when somebody raises, that's a pretty beginner concept to learn. So you can label that as your beginner pre-flop mistake or beginner pre-flop concept that you're trying to improve, all the way to really advanced concepts, right? And then as you study, you're going to prioritize those beginner concepts first. And then once you feel like you've improved enough on that, or it starts to feel very comfortable in game, you can move on to the more advanced concepts. So after a few months, you can check in with your game again and reevaluate what your new biggest mistakes are. You just don't want to waste time and energy on too many specific details or hands that are rare. A lot of people ask me certain hands, like, how did I play this hand? And they think that that's the best way to go about studying and improving, is just talking specific hands. But honestly, that can waste a lot of your energy, because most of the time when you're asking hands, either it was just a rare spot or it was a big pot, and those are the hands that you're worried about. But there are a lot more spots that happen more commonly or more often. So focus on concepts and nail down the concepts, and then you can improve from there. It's hard to feel like you're making progress in poker, so studying, feeling more confident in each of these spots, especially when you're feeling stuck, is just a great way to know that you're improving and to make big strides in your game. This kind of goes along with this question, but the final question, number 5, do you have to play GTO style, or can you play an old school strat to win these days? This is the main tool that I use, by the way, to answer the study question. This is the main tool that I use these days with my groups. It's a very powerful tool. But even the free tier, there's a completely free tier on this program that does all the pre-flop stuff. I'm not affiliated with this site, by the way. I think it's a great product. You don't really need to get to post-flop stuff to have a lot of things to study for a long time. So even though pre-flop is the only thing included in the free tier, that's a lot of information to work with. Back to the point about GTO versus old school. I think a lot of people assume that GTO style means you're playing like a computer, that you sit down, you memorize a bunch of spots, and then you try to play like a computer. And on the other hand, you have old school style, which is just going with your gut feeling that this guy doesn't have it in this moment and you're going to bluff him off his hand. Those two things are really separate styles, right? And so I can understand the urge to ask that question. Here, I'm going to just walk you through a hand to give you an example of how I use a solver tool like GTO Wizard to combine kind of both camps, both schools of thought here. In this spot, as you can see up top, the button has raised to 2.1 and the big blind has called. This is the flop. And now as big blind, we most often check towards the button, and now the action is on the button. So everything over here on the left-hand side that is in pink is what is gonna bet. Everything in green is when it's gonna check. So you can see that it mixes a lot of things, right? Sometimes it'll bet, sometimes it'll check. You can kind of come down to these little boxes and pop it out and see which option gives you more EV. So you can break it down in a very detailed way. But I'm going to go back to strategy just so you guys can see it a little more cleanly. Okay, so anyway, this is 30 big blinds, by the way. We're going to pretend we're big blind, and we want to know how often should we be check raising our opponent, especially if you're getting check raised a lot in game. You're like, oh, I feel like I'm just getting run over by all these regs. Okay, so these are the types of things they're studying. They're coming in and they're looking at, all right, once button bets, How often am I supposed to raise? I'm clicking on the big blind's action now. How often am I supposed to raise? After button bets 33%, it's now on the big blind. Everything in pink is what the solver would suggest that you raise with. So you can look, obviously top pairs are raising a lot. I don't know if some of you are raising things like Queen 10, but it wants to do it almost 100% of the time. And when I look off to the side of the EV, it's making a lot more by raising than calling, a lot more. So things like this, queens, obviously. Here's where you start to get a little funky. There's 10-6 suited, the worst gutters, 5-3 offsuit. You've got some ace-5 offsuit raising, ace-6 offsuit, ace-3 randomly sometimes. It's just mixing a whole bunch of random things that all seem to have in common that they can turn a backdoor straight draw, a backdoor flush draw, and they can continue barreling on those turn cards. So you can kind of just see very quickly the pattern that the solver, which types of hands it likes. So without having to memorize this board and these hands, if you just make a mental note of, okay, it likes to take hands that have backdoor flush draws, backdoor straight draws. I'm sure if we pulled up turn card options, when it turns some equity, it probably barrels again. Then now you've just made a whole master plan for check raising with 30 big blinds from the big blind versus a button C bet. But I want to just point out one thing. When we go to the button, when we've checked to the button, notice over here that it says 35.9. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but look at this green box that's kind of flashing on the screen. It's checking 36% of the time as the button. Now, if you're playing in a game where you think the pre-flop raiser from the button is not going to check back on this board that often against a big blind call, they're going to bet maybe 100% of the time and have 0% checks. Now, all of a sudden, their range is a lot wider on the flop. And so I'm going to go back to the big blind. So you can deduce with that little bit of opponent information or your assumptions about how your opponent plays that you could be raising even more than this. So if you take some of these examples, like it wants to raise 5-3 offsuit some of the time, right? Maybe if I have an opponent that bets 100% of the time, I'm going to just raise 5-3 offsuit every single time because I know it's just a good hand to raise anyway, and I'm going to just up that frequency against a player who is c-betting way more than they're quote-unquote supposed to be c-betting. It's good to note that, you know, a player who c-bets 100% is probably not used to getting check raised very often because you start to check back more if you're against players who check raise you. So your check raise will work even more. So these tools, they just are giving you the confidence to know what type of hand class you should be raising with, how aggressive you can be against players, and then you're taking your own assumptions, your own old school, you know, assumptions about how the general population plays or about how your specific opponent is playing at that table, and then you combine the two to give you the confidence to make these aggressive raises in game. So that's how I'm personally using it. I just wanted to show you one quick example. If you're unfamiliar with the software, I thought that was the best way of explaining the combination of like GTO and old school. They don't have to be two separate things. At the end of the day, yes, I still think showing up to a live table especially and noticing if your opponent has a change in behavior or some sort of live tell that you're really picking up on, don't ignore that and play like a computer. Maybe you just bluff even more when it happens, or maybe you fold a little more because you just don't think they're bluffing in that moment. Both strategies combined, I think you will be a force to be reckoned with at the table. They are valid. They're both valid ways to play poker. Poker has been played like that way longer than the solvers, the solver strategy. I think at first people did try to memorize and play like the computers, and now they realize, okay, no, this is the computer playing against itself, right? So it's figuring out the best sort of strategy to make plus EV plays along the way. So that's the spiel about GTO versus old school. I think that GTO study and everything is certainly necessary to improve your game, and in this day and age you're going to want to get familiar with these tools. It's only going to help you improve faster, and like I said, it's going to give you a good foundation to then pull the trigger in game and learn. So those were all 5 questions, you guys. So those were all the rapid fire questions that I got asked most in the AMA thread. If you want the full responses written in a more digestible form, you can check out the AMA thread that's going to stay on CardsChat. And you could follow me on my YouTube channel at Ashley Sleeth, or you could follow me on social media to ask any other burning questions that you have going forward. So nice to meet you all. If you guys are staying active in the CardsChat community, I highly recommend coming out during the summer to participate in the Colossus team event that they do every summer. We had a blast this year. It was very fun to meet you all in person, and it was a great first WSOP experience for many. So I encourage you to try that out. And that's all for me. Thank you guys so much, and good luck at the tables and with all of your poker endeavors in the future. Bye-bye.